Welcome to Wellness Debunked. We debunk myths about nutrition and fitness. We can eat and train without restriction. My name's Gabe. I'm typically alongside co-host nutritionist Olivia Carone, but instead we got Daniel Frankel. Pronounce that correctly, right?
Yes, he did.
Fantastic. Physiotherapist, strength coach, awesome dude joining us today. Welcome, Daniel.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
How you doing today?
I'm doing excellent. It's a wonderful day in Montreal.
You got stuck in traffic?
Yeah.
Still a wonderful day. Welcome back to Montreal. In case you guys don't know, Montreal is notorious for having awful traffic. Yeah, but glad you made it.
Thank you.
And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about all things pain, myths with pain, getting back to training, all this stuff. Daniel.
Yes.
Introduce yourself, tell the listeners who you are, what got you here, what got you strength training in physiotherapy. Take it away. The floor is yours.
So I have been a strength and conditioning coach for 15 years. I started when I was a teenager. I am also a physiotherapist, which is, I think this is my 5th year, 4.5 years that I've been a physio. I landed where I am when I was back as a teenager. I started to get really into lifting weights. P90X was my first exposure to
Tony,
the man,
Tony.
the myth, the legend.
Tony, oh, I did P90X.
So I was doing P90X. I was a competitive trampolinist way back when. I'm also afraid of heights. And so those two things did not really go very well hand in hand. And when I started,
fears.
yeah, that's right. But also you have to realize when you're not going to be good at something.
Yeah.
So I started high school and there was an after school CrossFit workout club. This was like 2008, like early days CrossFit. We had this teacher who was running an after school CrossFit club. So I got into some functional fitness training, some strength training, decided, okay, I want to go compete in CrossFit because that sounded like a cool thing to do, but I was really small. And so the advice that was given to me at the time was go do weightlifting for a little bit, go do strength training, get your muscle up, get stronger. And then if you're interested in CrossFit, you can get back to CrossFit. So I found Olympic weightlifting through strength training. And I found that you could compete in weight classes and I could be a smaller guy and still be competitive. So
Strongest.
yeah, exactly. So I started
Strongest podcast, by the way.
Excellent. So I started training Olympic weightlifting, which now I've been doing for about 15 years. At the time, I was coaching trampoline. I was coaching at this after school workout club. When I finished high school, got into undergrad, I was coaching varsity strength and conditioning and at a CrossFit gym. And as I started to get exposed to more and more types of people and different types of coaching environments, group classes, individual, recreational, competitive, the thing that became very apparent is I didn't have any understanding of how to deal with injuries. And for people who had very high achieving goals, injuries would be inevitable at some point in the process. Like somebody might come to me and say, hey, I want to back squat 700 pounds. Can you get me there? From a theory standpoint and with the kinesiology background that I studied in undergrad, I felt confident in my ability to get the person to be able to be that strong, but injuries throughout that process were inevitable. And that was where my knowledge stopped. And reason one that I went to physio school was I wanted to go understand what do we do when somebody gets injured? How do we prevent injury? How do we effectively and efficiently rehabilitate the injury? The second was as a naive 20, 21-year-old, I was like, oh, fitness industry is the Wild West. Let me get this physiotherapy credential and then people will respect me. And so I went to physio school and I got my master's degree, came out the other end and then realized, oh, every industry is the Wild West and nobody really cares about the letters after your name. Right. I'm still happy to have gotten the education. I really appreciated the schooling that I got, but physio is also very much the Wild West, as I'm sure we'll get into today.
Absolutely. But going back to what you said with kinesiology, that was something that I found that was lacking when I did the program as well too. They briefly touched upon injury prevention and stuff like that, but not enough to actually be competent in getting someone towards their goal. So good on you for going into physio. But as you mentioned, Wild West out there, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Can you give an example at a time where you're just like, fuck, like this is,
I think
this is the Wild West.
And to your point of when we're in one area of schooling, let's say kinesiology versus rehabilitation, like you're almost considered these two discrete silos. In some ways they are, and in other ways, they're basically the exact same thing at opposite ends of the same spectrum, which we'll chat about as well. But because the individual, the physio versus the strength coach are in these two discrete silos, there's this idea of, okay, now you're injured, so you have to listen to me versus now you're not injured, so you have to listen to the other person. And traditional, this is like the most generalistic statement, but like traditional strength and conditioning coach might just be like, hey, we're going to push through the pain. We're going to ignore it until no pain, no gain. Yeah. And then on the other side of the spectrum, it's okay. From the rehab standpoint, we're going to rest. We're going to wait until things get better. We're just going to, something hurts. We're not going to do it. And both strategies lead to disaster. And I think that the way to do it effectively is to effectively bridge the gap between those two realms.
Yeah, you don't want to get stuck on the floor doing low-level rehab drills for the rest of your life, especially for that person, like you said, who wants to back squat 700 pounds.
That's right.
It's just, that's not going to get you there.
No.
So that is an issue. And that's a nice segue to my next question, which is, what do you feel is the biggest disconnect right now between physiotherapy and strength training? What is that kind of biggest gap that you see right now?
The thing that I see the most consistently is that rehab practitioners, generalistic statement, the rehab practitioners don't seem to have a real true understanding of the physical and force demands that their clients are getting exposed to outside of the gym.
Yeah.
So somebody comes in with, I don't know, an ankle injury, ankle sprain. And so you give them their TheraBand exercises and their single leg balance, Bosu ball stuff for sure. Pain goes away. Okay, you're good to go. But we're disregarding the fact that this person might be a 300-pound offensive lineman who needs to be able to squat 650, who needs to be able to tackle another guy head on. And no amount of single leg calf raises are going to get you there. I once posed the question to a group of physios that I was with of like, how many of you would be comfortable observing a client deadlifting 135 pounds, which is like cake weight? 9 out of the 10 of them were like, no, that's heavy. I don't feel comfortable at all. And so it creates this disconnect where we're trying to protect that in case you in the cushiony bubble of stay away from activity and things that may stress the tissue and the system or the structure in question. But that same degree of stress, when applied appropriately, is what's going to get you back to the realm of being able to perform in that set of athletic demands.
So you're saying that one of the biggest gaps is essentially the inability to progress beyond those low-level stuff, totally incapable of adding the appropriate loading strategies, progressions, etc. That's where you see a big issue right now.
Even when I was in school, and this seems to be a common consensus amongst physio and rehab students, there isn't enough exposure to strength and conditioning, weight room, being exposed to higher performance, not even athletes, but just higher performing individuals. What happens when we take the TheraBands out of the equation, the 5-pound
or a 135-pound deadlift?
100%. And so you can get a pretty good idea if you go into a physio clinic and you see, well, what do they have for exercise? How many weights do they have? Is it just like a tiny little corner with a dusty pair of 5-pound dumbbells? That'll give you a really good indication as to how active of a professional this person is.
And there's a lot of stuff that we're going to dive into today, but if there was one thing you would like to debunk, this is a podcast of debunking myths. What would you like to debunk today?
Rest is not best. That I think would be the one big message that would be great to put across here.
Explain why.
Okay. So when we get an injury, human nature is, ow, this hurts. Let's not do the thing that hurts. And that's very reasonable to come to that conclusion. And in the very, very short term, like we're talking a couple hours, maybe 12 to 24 hours, that approach is reasonable, and that we want to give the body an opportunity to just accommodate to the shock or the stress or the trauma that it's been exposed to. Beyond that initial 24, maybe 36 hours, we have to find a entry point to physical training. And that entry point needs to be sustainable. It has to be something that the individual could be consistent with, that's specific to their needs, that is progressible from whatever point it starts at, and is also under the realm of a malleable approach. And the reason that we want to do that, take the active route as opposed to the passive route, is if we don't do anything, if we rest for God knows how long, days, weeks, months, oh, I hurt my back 3 years ago, it was never the same, but I haven't done anything since then, your muscles get weaker, your body gets deconditioned, and you become more sensitive and irritable with regards to the exposure to movement or motion or activity in general. So it creates this vicious cycle of I'm in pain, so I stop moving. Because I stop moving, I end up being in more pain, and it just loops over and over. And the individual never gets back to the level of activity that they want or need to get back to.
Can you give a specific example of a patient or a client, someone you've worked with, someone that you observed going through this exact cycle before?
Sure, absolutely. So I see a lot of people in clinic will come to me after having had, unfortunately, unsuccessful bouts of rehab care with other practitioners. People will, so an example would be individual, they get a quad strain. They're a weightlifter or power lifter. They do some strength training. They have a quad strain, and the quad strain happened while they were squatting, and the squat was at 300 pounds. So, ow, it hurt while I was squatting. Now I'm going to not squat. I'm going to take some time off squatting.
Yeah.
Because they don't do any rehab, they're sitting and resting. They're waiting for it to heal. 3 weeks later, they try to squat maybe 250. Still a pretty high demand, but that load is well beyond what their now diminished capacity is. And so, ow, it hurts again. Okay, I must need more time off. They wait a couple more weeks. Then they try 200. Ow, that also hurts. And so this cycle continues where they're getting weaker and weaker as they're waiting too long to get exposed to the movement. And let's say the goal for that individual is to get back to the 3 push-down squat. It's like, we might need to take a temporary step back in order to move forward. But what that might take the format of is maybe we're doing goblet squats with 40, 50, 70, 100 pounds. Maybe we're doing back squats at a tempo at 100, 150 pounds. We find a sustainable entry point where the pain is not excessively significant, where you can recover from that bout of activity and then build from there over and over incrementally until you get back to 200, 250. The longer that you wait, the more weak you're going to get, and also the more fearful you're going to be of getting exposed to that potentially harmful load. And so it's really important to take the active approach as opposed to you go seek out the rehab practitioner who lays you on the table. It's just a passive approach. They're doing massage, they're doing acupuncture, they're using the TENS machine. These things might help you feel good in the moment, which is not to be discredited, but there's no actual strengthening or building of the resilience of the tissues that's happening throughout that process.
And promotion of independence.
Absolutely. 100%.
That's something that I see a lot of people struggle with when they rely solely on passive modalities. It's just, I need to go see my practitioner. He will fix me. Just no, you can do this yourself too. We're here to guide you.
100%.
And it's really unfortunate that for some people, this can last years. That they're just like, I need to call my chiro, physio, rehab practitioner to adjust me, fix me, instead of relying on strategies and tools to promote that independence. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
What's your approach working with someone who is struggling with pain, but you still want to remain active?
Yeah, absolutely. I think some considerations you have to make right off the bat are, is it an acute versus a chronic injury? Right. If something has been present for a very long time, I'm a little less worried about excessively exacerbating the condition because it's been present for a long time. The body, for the most part, has accommodated to that degree of discomfort or irritation in many regards.
Right.
If it's acute, we do want to be protective in that we don't want to make things worse. We don't want to take what could be a partial grade 1 sprain and turn it into a fully blown ruptured ligament by just ignoring what's present. The other thing we have to be considerate of is, what is the goal that the individual has and how much time do they have to achieve? Are they, and this is probably 1% of 1% of the people that either of us might work with, but are they a gold medal contender at the Olympics, and the Olympics are 3 weeks away? It's okay. We're going to be
different story.
General population, which I think we both work with, where we're generally looking for health and longevity. We want the individual to perform, but we also want them to be able to do it in a manner where they're not sacrificing their long-term health in order to accomplish whatever athletic feat they're trying to participate in. That out of the way, I'm a big fan of using a traffic light system where we're taking pain from 0 to 10. 0 is no pain at all. 10 is the worst you could possibly imagine. 6 or higher, I generally would quantify as a red light. It's not going to be very productive for us to be exposed to excessive levels of pain over and over again. 0 to 3, green light. So a little bit of pain or discomfort is okay, but it's very important that it has to be sustainable. It has to be reasonable, tolerable for the individual. And in the middle are 4 to 5, I would characterize as a yellow light. So some yellow lights, you hit the gas, you drive through the intersection, maybe more often here in the city than elsewhere. Other yellow lights, you hit the brakes and you stop. And so we're paying attention to 2 things if it's in that yellow light zone. One is, with repetition, does the pain get better? Does it get worse? Does it stay the same? If you start, let's say you're doing squats and you have some quad pain or some knee pain, and the pain starts at a 4.5, and you do 3 sets of 10, and by the end of the second set, it settles down to a 2 or a 3. Cool. Green light. Like, that would be good indication that your body is initially a little bit sensitive to that stress. It's settled down. We might find this with tendon related injuries, tendency to settle down from a pain standpoint. When we get more blood flow to the tendon, we do a little bit more. We elongate the warm up, then we can totally tolerate a bout of activity. That would be in contrast to, it's a 4.5, a 5, and then we do a set of 10 and now it's a 7. We do a set of 10 and now it's a 9. We do a set of 10, now it's a 10. That's your body telling you that this physical stressor is not being well tolerated. we should take a step back. We should either change the movement altogether. We should decrease the load. We should play around with some of the mechanical parameters, which maybe we can get into in a couple minutes, that we might use to modify a movement. If that movement is necessary or beneficial to that client, we need to keep them squatting despite a knee injury. If the pain stays the same, if it's a 4.5, a 5, and then it stays at a 4.5 to the 5 the entire duration, how long does it take to settle down after the activity? Is it minutes? Is it hours? Is it 24 hours? Is it 7 straight days after the activity? If we're getting past the like 36-hour time frame and there really is no decrease in discomfort, beyond probably pushing the marker a little bit too aggressive. So we have to be cognizant of there is something going on, whether it's purely biological, there's a tissue injury, whether it's a psychosocial component. I'm fearful of the injury and we need to be respectful of the nervous system's level of sensitivity to that injury. But beyond that, we do have to take this gradual exposure approach to gradually expose the body to increased load, increased activity, increased intensity, such to bring it beyond the baseline of where it's at.
Now, you mentioned parameters earlier. Can you walk us through an example? As you mentioned before, the weightlifter squatting, I think you said 300 pounds. Let's take the example, quad strain, yellow light.
Sure.
They had the quad strain at 300 pounds and now they got the yellow light 250.
Okay. Yeah. So it's a good example. So let's say they are, 2 weeks post quad strain, just to provide a little bit more context here. And assuming there's no competition related goals on the forefront, so we have all the time in the world, what we want to pay attention to is how did they feel afterwards? Let's say it took them 36, maybe 48 hours for the pain to settle down. We're about the longer end of that time frame that we're looking at. The next time that we go into squat, which maybe is a couple days later, maybe it's following, we might just want to do a little bit less while still trying to make sure that the training session is. And when I say productive, generally what I'm looking for is, can we make the muscles fatigue in a manner that doesn't cause excessive pain? So let's say 300 pounds for one caused the strain, 50 pounds for one caused the yellow light. What if we do 185 for a 5x5? And let's say one example would be the client goes, that's way too easy. It's a piece of cake. I'm not getting anything out of it. Okay, let's do the 5x5 and let's add a 5-second descent and a 5-second pause on each rep. That's going to be really freaking hard. That's probably going to be much harder than the 300-pound squat, a lot of pausing on the 1 to 2 second mark. And so I was saying there's some mechanical parameters we can play around with. One is the tempo of the movement. So ultimately what we're trying to achieve is muscle fatigue without excessive pain. But for the most part, that's generally what we're doing. So if we want the muscles to be fatigued, we can fatigue them in a couple of ways. One is we can add tempo to the movement. We can add pauses. We can add an elongated eccentric or concentric portion, or both, or all three with a pause as well. Or multiple pauses. The world is your oyster.
That's brutal though.
Yeah, it would be really brutal. But again, it's like the weight is almost arbitrary. The number we put on the bar is a product of what we're looking for. We're trying to achieve muscular fatigue.
Yes.
Can we do that with less weight? Absolutely. Could we do that with more weight? 100%. But if we're limited by the absolute amount of load that the muscles can tolerate via strain, ligament sprain, maybe we're recovering from a surgery, it's a couple weeks or months later, we can always play around with tempo. That would be number one. Number two is we can play around with range of motion. So let's say the deep position of a squat hurts when I'm all the way ass to grass. That's painful to my knee, to my hip, maybe my low back, whatever the joint may be. All of the above, who's to say? We can do a box squat. We could do a half squat. We could just go halfway down and halfway up. A lateral raise, maybe going all the way up overhead is excessively painful. We could go up halfway. Bicep curl, we could come up halfway and back down. So we can use the modification of the range of motion that the person's exposed to in order to play around with having less exposure irritating to loads that irritate you in certain positions. Parameter number 3 is we can change where the center of mass is relative to where the injured area is. So the best example here would be if you have a low back injury, you could do a conventional deadlift where your shoulders are going to be much further extended beyond where your low back is. And your low back is here and your shoulders are here. There's going to be a lot more torque that's present on the low back as the weight that's pulling the arms. If we switch to a sumo style, there's much less torque that's present on the low back because the shoulders are much closer towards where the low back is. Depending on the joint that we're playing around with, we might want to play around with different positions or different variations. So let's say my knees hurt and I'm trying to squat. What I probably won't tolerate very well is a front squat, but what I might tolerate much better is a low bar back squat. But if the back is the injured area, I might not tolerate the low bar back squat all that much, and I might want to use the front squat or a belt squat or something like that. So we can always play around with tempo, we can always play around with range of motion, and we can always play around with via exercise selection where the center of mass is relative to the body.
So the tempo, range of motion, exercise variation, exercise selection, is that something you feel that was missing from what you observed in other clinics? Like in rehab clinics, for example.
I think it was that combined with a lack of understanding of how to take somebody beyond
How to progress
baseline. So the way that I view injury rehab is with injury, person who's injured or in pain, we have baseline, and then we have performance, which is just anything beyond baseline. It doesn't have to be Olympic gold medal or
spectrum.
Baseline to injury rehab, that's where the physio fits in. Baseline or maybe just below baseline on to performance is generally where the strength and conditioning coach fits into play. But the principles through which we move somebody across the spectrum are the exact same. Principle of progressiveness, principle of specificity, principle of sustainability, consistency, specificity, malleability, like all of the things that we would use to get somebody fitter and healthier, we also would use to take somebody from injured to not injured. It just tends to be a bit of a more drawn out series of progressions. And so where I think there was a falling short from a rehab physio side of things in a lot of clinics that I was at is the focus was so much on the injury rehab to baseline. And then it's like you hit baseline. Okay, see you later. Like go find somebody who can take you beyond that without really understanding that the body is very resilient. And a lot of physios seem very hesitant to load the individual to beyond the 135-pound deadlift to the, or even beyond. And the example here would be like, let's say you have a power lifter or somebody who power lifts recreationally and they deadlift 600 pounds. If they have a low back injury, in my mind, they're in rehab mode until they deadlift 601. But the number of physios who are going to say, okay, let's load you to 495. Let's load you to 550. It's not going to happen, unfortunately.
And what I've noticed as well too is you'll remove the load, you'll remove all these parameters, and then people start feeling better. It's like, yeah, no shit, they're feeling better.
Yeah.
You literally removed every single stimulus.
Yeah, literally.
And it's just like, oh yeah, like my methodology worked, my approach works. It's just like, no, you just literally deconditioned a person, removed all the stimuli. And yeah, no shit, the person's pain-free, but the minute they start loading back up with nothing to progress with, ain't gonna come up.
All this like the boom bust cycle. I like to call it being stuck in rehab purgatory, where it's like, get just recovered enough, pain goes away, and then just, I don't know. Let's see if somebody yells at me on the internet. I'll take the purgatory. You're injured, covered just enough, pain goes away via the exact method you just identified, just removing load. Physio discharges, you're deconditioned, you get injured. You get just barely recovered, you get discharged, and then you get injured. So you bounce back and forth between baseline and injury rehab, never actually getting beyond.
My name the episode Rehab Purgatory.
Love it. Love it. How to get out of rehab purgatory. And so here's where it's like the method is so simple. The vast majority of injuries are a load management issue. Either load is exceeding capacity. And when we say capacity in the context of the structure in question, the greater structure that might be the arm, the system as a whole, that is the body, it depends on our frame of reference for the injury. The load is either exceeding the capacity in the moment. So that would be an acute injury. You're on a football field. The other guy hits your knee. Load that's present on the knee exceeds the capacity the ligaments of the knee have. Your knee, it snaps or explodes or whatever.
Right.
That would be in the moment. Or you have chronic load exceeding capacity, which is like shoulder tendonitis, rotator cuff related pain, where it hurts a little bit, but you just push through and it goes for weeks and months. And eventually you get to the point where it's, oh my God, cannot lift my arm over.
The general pop clients who tried CrossFit.
Absolutely.
And then they started snatching and they're like, this is cool. And then 8 months later, they're like, my shoulder fucking.
Or the people who are like, oh, I'm going to start strength training. Oh, I'm getting better every week. Oh, I guess I should max out every week.
Yeah.
Okay, 9 weeks of max outs later. Oh, why does my back hurt? Why does my knee hurt? So anyways, most injuries are a product of load exceeding capacity, which means that from a rehab standpoint, we really have two options. We decrease load in the short term. We want to find the low hanging fruits of where is there excessive stress on the system, the structure in question. In the long term, how do we improve capacity, which generally takes the format of how do we improve strength or the resiliency of the tissue. It could also be extrapolated to how do we improve endurance, mobility, and balance, and the other traits of fitness that we got. But that's really it. When we're looking at, let's throw massage at the individual, throw acupuncture at the individual, let's get them to fix their sleep pattern, let's get them to increase their protein intake. What we're really trying to do is modulate those load and capacity parameters in addition to playing around with the volume of the training session itself. If we sleep more, our capacity will be more. If we have muscles that are super tight and they're under a lot of tension and we massage them such that they calm down, in some regard, we're decreasing the load that's present on the system. And so that's really what injury rehab comes down to. Like literally when I went to go get my master's degree to tell me how to do load management, but it's common sense.
Yeah.
Do less of the thing that hurts, trying to do as much as you can of the things that don't hurt.
Yeah. And this applies to acute chronic pain.
Absolutely. 100%.
Can you explain to the listeners how this would apply to chronic pain, for example?
Sure. So in a chronic pain standpoint, generally speaking, we're going to find a couple of things. Load is consistently exceeding capacity. So I'm trying to train too hard too frequently. Oh, it's like I used to be able to squat 300 pounds. Why does it hurt every time I squat 200 pounds? But you've been in pain for so long and you've become so deconditioned that 200 pounds is now exceeding your capacity. Your capacity is no longer 300 pounds. It might have been a year ago, 3 years ago, but that doesn't mean that we can just jump back into it without any second thought.
Yep.
We also have to pay attention, and this goes well beyond what's happening in the gym, to the lifestyle factors beyond the gym. What is sleep like? What is protein intake like? What is general stress levels like? What is the degree of psychosocial support that you have in your life, in the work environment you have amongst your friends and family? Do you work at a company where all of your colleagues think you're a dweeb for exercising? That's not going to be very conducive to you feeling good about the fact that you're taking proactive, positive steps with your health. And it seems silly that it's, oh, is that the reason you're in pain? No, there's other factors at play, but it certainly plays into the general matrix that is your body and nervous system.
Absolutely.
Alcohol smoking intake is another big one as well. Those represent load that's being imposed on the system. So when somebody comes in to see me, we have to take what I would call a client-centered approach. I didn't coin this term, but when we take a client-centered approach, it means that when I'm trying to treat you, when I'm trying to provide a plan for you to move forward, yes, I'm bringing my expertise into the equation. Yes, I'm going to bring in the best available research and evidence into the equation. But the third part of that equation is, what is your history, the beliefs, attitudes around how we can go about doing the thing that we're trying to do? What's your past medical history, your personal factors? Because if you come to the table and you're like, hey, I have 30 minutes to do exercise every week because my job has me working 18 hours a day and I'm sleeping 3 hours a night.
Just
like,
found the bottleneck.
You can't be like, oh, you need to be doing Tabata squats 4 times a week. Okay, but there are personal factors at play. I can't have you do a 2-hour training session. Can we improve your sleep at all? Should we mitigate your stress levels? Can we get you throwing in a couple movement snacks into the equation so that we can bring up your total activity levels in a manner that isn't so unsustainable that you're going to burn out and fall back into this rehab purgatory type of things?
I love that you brought up support. When I was working in clinic a number of years ago, I was working a lot with CSST patients, and they were shamed so often for being on work leave, and that was affecting their pain. And not only the support, but also people's perception of pain. The education aspect is so critical when it comes to chronic pain. Like, people's perception of pain is completely different.
Absolutely.
And it's just so important for the practitioner to educate the person on how pain functions so they can understand what's coming and what to expect.
It's probably one of the most common conversation pieces that I'll have with people, especially right after an injury, because with good reason, they're fearful of being exposed to things that they perceive as might make the pain worse. And so the way that I explain what pain is to people is very akin to a smoke alarm system. You want smoke alarm to go off if there's a fire, but you might have a smoke alarm go off when you're making toast in the toaster. And it depends on a lot of factors. How sensitive is the alarm? How dark is the toast getting? Is the alarm centered directly above the toaster? And we want the alarm to go off if there's a fire, because it alerts us to the presence of this potentially harmful phenomenon. But if every single time the alarm goes off, we go, there must be a fire, call 911, let's leave the building. Okay, most of the time, it's probably not going to be a fire. And context is relevant here. Like, if I have a quad strain at 300 pounds and I spend a week trying to load 400 pounds in the bar, okay, that's not a good kind of pain. Like, we shouldn't be doing that. But the thing that also I find so fascinating is how receptive and sensitive we either can or cannot be to the pain response. And so the analogy is, you're living in an apartment building, 10th floor of the building, the fire alarm goes off in the middle of the night. It's the most in-your-face thing in the world. It wakes you up out of your sleep. You're walking down the stairs. As you start walking down the stairs, the alarm is extremely in your face. By the time you get down to the first floor, you're talking to the person next to you. The alarm is no less loud than it was 5 or 10 minutes ago, but your brain learns to tune some of that response to that sensation. And so that's where if you're in pain and the only choice that you make is to not move, you're just going to become more and more sensitive to the pain.
Vicious cycle, as you mentioned before.
The most vicious cycle.
And how would you help clients in particular overcome this fear of movement?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. you have to start with gradual exposure. So person gets hurt with, actually, we'll move away from the squat analogy and
Sure.
we'll move to a different one.
Sure.
We all have friends who are afraid of dogs. That person probably got bit by a dog when they were 3 years old, 4 years old. Let's say you were that person. You and I are walking down the street. You and I are walking down the streets after this episode.
Yeah.
We see a dog 600 meters away. I love dogs. I'm like, oh my God, it's fluffy. It's cute. I want to pet it. I want to play with it, whatever. You're like, got a dog. Your heart rate starts racing. Your palms get sweaty. Your hair stands up on end. And it's like you have a real physiological reaction to a totally non-threatening stimulus, or potentially totally non-threatening stimulus. We haven't met the dog yet. We don't know if it's friendlier. And so we can't discredit the experience of the individual. I can't be like, what are you, afraid of dogs? Stop being a wuss. It's like, you're having a real experience to that. And it's based off of this prior history that you've been exposed to. Who am I to discredit? So somebody comes in, they've had 5 years of pain. The worst thing that I could do is discredit that experience and go, no, it's in your head. We just have to load it.
Guaranteed that rehab will not go well.
I'll never see them again. And so it's, what do? Maybe we stay 600 meters away from the dog until we get comfortable being 600 meters away from the dog. And so maybe it's, oh, it turns out the dog happens to go on the same route that you go on at the same time every day when you go for a walk.
Yeah.
Okay, the 20th, the 30th, the 50th time you see the dog from 600 meters away, you're probably going to be at least a little bit more accustomed to it.
Yep.
Hopefully it'll happen sooner than 50, but so be it. Then you get accustomed to being 400 meters away from the dog, 200 meters, 50 meters, being in the same room as the dog, but it's on a leash, being in the same room as the dog and it's not on a leash, and it's the same dog each time. So you know that it's better. The context of fitness and rehab, it's, let's say the fear is around, I'm going to hurt my body if I try to exercise. Just blanket statement. No real context as to what exercise that person is afraid of, how much exercise they might be afraid of doing, where they might hurt their body, which are important conversation pieces. The first thing that we need to do is explain to the individual that if we take a gentle, sustainable approach, the risk of injury is extremely well mitigated. We have to put that person's mind at ease such that they would then subsequently be open to trying some movement.
Yep.
And that movement might be light isometrics. It might start with gentle yoga stretching. It might start with table or bed exercises. We're lying on the ground. We're doing some body weight, pelvic tucks, cat camel. If that person is so overtly sensitized to movements. Now, if they've seen me in the clinic, they've walked in. So I know, at least from a physical function standpoint, their legs work. They've been able to sit down onto the chair. They've demonstrated to me they can do a sit to stand, which is a huge marker of physical function. So generally, we're going to start a little bit beyond the, hey, this is how we lift our arm and back down, but you might find that in some settings. And then after we do a little bit of that, it's like, maybe we try pelvic tucks 3 sets of 10. Let's try 1 set of 10. How did it feel? We check in with the individual. Or do you feel worse off as a result of doing that, better, or the same? They're probably not going to say worse off. Okay, cool. Let's try to do 3 sets of 10. And as that's happening, I'm going to chat with them a little bit, trying to help make them feel at ease, explore a little bit more of their story that we probably already chatted about, but we met them before we're just starting to move. And then later on, we, in that same day, or maybe the day after, we progress to a cat camel, to a bridge, maybe we start with a 5-pound. So it's not to discredit the physio clinic that has the dusty 5-pound weights in the corner. Maybe it's a bad thing if they're dusty because used, but we want to make sure that we're finding what is reasonable and appropriate for the individual and then taking a step forward.
It's like the spectrum, like you mentioned before.
100%. So the analogy here, the other analogy is my quantum physics analogy that I love. Anybody who's been a client of mine is so sick of hearing this. But if you wanted to become a quantum physicist, I have no interest in doing,
Nor do I.
you start with grade 1 math, then you do grade 2 math, grade 3, 4, high school, university, postgrad, etc. If you walk into grade 1 math class and your teacher is like, all right, kids, take out quantum physics 101 textbooks, you're never going to learn anything. Like, it's way beyond your ability to comprehend material. Conversely, you go to quantum physics 101, it's your first day in university. You're like, cool, I'm ready to start learning quantum physics. And your prof is like, grade 1 math textbook, let's take it out. It's too far beneath me. You're not going to learn anything. What you don't want to do is start with grade 1 math and then do grade 1 math. You have to progress. There has to be this positive incremental progression forward. We can't practice the same thing over and over and over. And particularly when somebody's in chronic pain, what we don't want to do is say, hey, here are the 3 to 4 exercises you're going to do every day. Do those for 9 months. There has to be some progression of where we're starting and where we're going to.
Yep.
Place and time for clamshells and bird dogs and pelvic tucks and cat camels. there's also a very early reached point where that might be good from a just general movement, mobility, gets blood flowing standpoint, but it's not going to make your tissues more resilient to physical stress.
Exactly.
We have to get to grade 2, grade 6,
Exactly.
so on and so forth.
And we said this off camera before, but how many of your patients have heard that quantum physics theory?
Pretty much every single one.
Yeah. So if they're listening to this, just like, here he goes again.
Yeah. They could probably recite it for me.
So can you walk us through what's the most challenging thing for you in working with a client who has a significant amount of pain? What is the biggest challenge you've seen? Not even significant. Let's just say pain in general. What's the toughest thing for you?
One piece is everybody needs a different approach. Everybody's unique. Everybody has their own set of history and experiences and lived beliefs and attitudes around what they want to achieve in their life and their body and where their limitations and restrictions are. There is a significant amount of poor education that comes from non-rehab practitioners and also from rehab practitioners that leads. It's just a very fear-mongering based approach that leads to people feeling like their bodies are very fragile structures. And the reality could not be less true. Like, we are extremely resilient. We're capable of tolerating extreme amounts of physical stress and mental and emotional stress as well. But from a physio side of things, it's like people come in sometimes to see me worried that their body is going to break if they move it. And that requires a lot of listening to start, of understanding where the individual is at such that we can take them to where they're not. It's challenging in that it requires a unique approach. The thing that is very nice is that because of how adaptable the body is and how reliably adaptable it is, I get the wonderful opportunity to show these people how resilient their bodies are, but showing them, hey, you can lift a 5-pound weight, you can lift a 50-pound weight, a 100-pound weight, depending on the context of the individual. But it's very challenging. Maybe another challenge is social media leading to a lot of people to worry about doing things the wrong way. There are so few incorrect, quote unquote, ways that we can be moving our body. People come in going, okay, what if I do a squat and it's done this way, like I'm going to hurt myself. And if the load is exceeding the capacity that's present, okay, fair enough. But if it's not, the posture that you're in is likely to have an adverse outcome. It's not to say that we don't care about form and function, but the example here would be, I could pick up a box and I could hold it at shoulder height here, and I could hold it here.
Yeah.
This is going to be far less sustainable than this, but this isn't wrong. Maybe I'm holding a tool that's very long and the center of mass of the tool is out here and I have to hold it there. Or the demands of my job require me to be able to hold it out there. I gave a lecture at McMaster University a couple of years ago that was called perfect movement, fact or fiction. And so the big thing I was trying to portray was our bodies are very versatile and mobile structures, and there's no such thing as perfect form. There's just, do we have the prerequisite capacity for the load and position that we're being exposed to? And the example that I gave was, I put up this photo of a Cirque du Soleil performer who was doing it was like a human pyramid. So two people on the bottom, the knees, one person on the top, the hand on each of their shoulders, that he was in a back bend. So his feet were hanging over his head. So he needed to be in a position of horizontal pushing support, or he might have been in the back bend supporting the two people in the air, but it required a lot of horizontal pushing force. Yeah. And the next slide was this gentleman doing a back bend, bench pressing 115 pounds. Damn. So his feet were pointed to where your head would be on a bar. They were strapped in and he was leaning back and benching back and forth. And it's like, is that dangerous? There might be more risk with a movement like that relative to benching in a normal, neutral, quote unquote position. Would I have somebody try that on day one? Fuck no. But if that person's livelihood is predicated on their ability to produce horizontal pushing force in a back bent position, then we should probably prepare the body for that demand, as opposed to say, hey, don't do that. You're going to hurt yourself. Don't even think about considering it. He needs to be able to attain produce force in that position.
Yeah, doing a floor press with 10 pounds isn't going to get you very far. Yeah. So can you walk the listeners through how you would assess if a person needs to modify an exercise versus take out the exercise completely? Can you give an example of that?
It's a good question. Okay, so assuming that's because there's pain or discomfort present.
Yes.
If there wasn't, it's just a matter of, do you want to do the thing? Do you not want to do the thing? Once there's pain or discomfort present and that question arises, the first question is, Do you want to do this thing?
Yes.
And it's, do we need to be doing a given movement? Is there a specific reason that we've chosen it? Sometimes the answer is absolutely yes, which I'll circle back to in a sec. But if the answer is no, it's like, we don't have to do any specific movement. We can just train based on how we want to train.
Such an important question to ask, and it gets missed so often.
100%.
Absolutely.
We make this assumption depending on what your style is of coaching and style of exercise coaching is. Okay, I am an Olympic weightlifter. Do I think that everybody needs to snatch and clean and jerk?
Yes.
Biased towards no in the context of this discussion. If you're a power lifter, do you think everybody needs to squat, bench, deadlift? Like, they might say yes, but the answer truly is no.
Yeah.
Really, it's like we need the body to be functional for its tasks. So we need it to be able to sit and stand. We need to be able to pick things up off the ground. We need to be able to reach overhead. So theoretically, we need to be doing some variation of squatting or deadlifting or pressing.
These are fundamental movements.
They're fundamental movements. They're things we do in our day-to-day life. The moment you can't stand up from a chair independently,
Big problem.
you are living with a PSW. You're living in a retirement home with requiring support. That is one of the biggest predictors of mortality is your ability to stand up from a chair on your own. In the context of what you're asking, let's say the person says, yes, I need to be able to do this movement. Okay, so what degree of pain does that movement cause? Is it green light? Is it yellow light? Is it red light? If it's green light, cool, keep doing the thing. If it's yellow light and it doesn't really seem to be getting worse, okay, let's keep doing it around the intensity we're doing it. Maybe let's lessen it a little bit for a few weeks such that we can build more capacity for that movement, build more volume or get exposed to more volume so that we become more confident with that movement.
Yep.
If it's red light, it's okay. First, we're going to try reducing range of motion. We're probably next going to try adding in a tempo, plus minus change in tempo, because you can use these things at the same time. And then we're probably, if tempo doesn't change at all, range of motion doesn't change, it's like being in a position, regardless of load that's present, is causing excessive pain.
Yep.
Then we're probably going to change the motion as a whole, while still trying to train the same muscles that would have been trained in the initial load.
Yep.
So let's say my quads hurt during the squat. I have a quad strain and the strain seems to be aggravated at the top of the squat.
Yep.
So I can't even do an eighth of the squat. It just seems to hurt. I don't really know how I'd be getting by during that, but
Squats aren't happening.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe we do a seated leg extension. Yep. Maybe I'm lying on my back and I'm doing an isometric leg hold up in the air where I'm trying to fatigue the quad in a manner that is tolerable for the individual. Can we fatigue the muscles in a way that doesn't hurt excessively? If so, cool, there's our entry point. We could take that quad raise and let's say we wanted to train the quad and never do another squat again. I wouldn't recommend, but let's say we try that. You could have them in a supine position. They're lying on their back. They do a leg raise. We add an ankle weight. We add a band on the ankle, pulling
Any kind of
down.
force. Yeah.
You could do a 4-minute isometric hold. You probably won't get a whole lot of strength from that, but the endurance capability that you'll get, the hypertrophy that you'll get out of the muscle will be significant if you do that long enough. 10 sets of 4 minutes. Again, would not recommend. That would be
Really
boring. But these variables are not rules. They're simply guidelines that we can play with, reps and sets at time under tension. You have your German volume training, which is your 10 sets of 10 back squats. You could do a 3 set of 5 with 3-second pause at the bottom, 5-second descent, 5-second ascent. That's brutal. I don't know which of those two is worse, but they're two completely different parameters.
It doesn't sound too pleasant.
No, I wouldn't recommend it.
You forgot to mention they had to strengthen their VMO.
Yep. That damn VMO.
Yep. That was the
missing
quad
link.
strength. God damn it. Most people, I hope some people understand, but
Very niche comment for a niche
terrible.
aspect of the
Yeah.
audience.
Terrible tragedy. What are some other ones? There's a VMO.
Some practitioners who will talk about trying to purport the notion that you need to strengthen individual segments of your multifidus.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that
Just
one.
train the back, bro. Just train your spinal extensors. Like,
How do you even do that?
it's a great question. I would just train spinal extension. I wouldn't waste 45 minutes on a singular segment of a single muscle when you could be using that time training the muscle bulk as a whole. You'll get way bigger bang for your buck.
It's also that damn supraspinatus too.
Yeah. Shoulder pain.
Must be the supraspinatus. How's the video? Oh boy. I think we spoke about this off air. Some clinic settings require you to do
Yes.
manual therapy.
I was chatting with a physio recently
Insane.
who was being told the secondhand from a chiro who works for a very large chain kind of boutique physio type of organization in Ontario. I think they're North America. And the rehab practitioner was told that in a 45-minute session that they were expected to do at least 40 minutes of manual, and they could only devote 5 minutes to exercise. 5 minutes. And so my friend, rightfully so, asked him, like, do your patients get better? And he was like, not really. Rehab purgatory.
But that's how we make money.
It is mind-blowing.
Oh, geez. All right. Yeah, we're coming up on an hour here. What are 2, 3 immediate action steps our listeners can take from this conversation from today?
I think most people need to sleep more.
Fair enough.
Yeah, new dad on the way here.
Yeah,
I'll
take that into consideration.
Yep. So definitely sleep more. I think that's when pain or injury arises, it's easy to say, tough to acknowledge, but don't freak out is the first and foremost. Like, most injuries heal pretty reliably, pretty quickly, 6 weeks at max. Generalizing, some things take significantly longer, but the vast majority of injuries heal very quickly.
Any kind of soft tissue when you're mentioning?
Soft tissue, strains, sprains. If there is no full rupture of tissue, even I remember reading a study in school around disc herniations where the worst disc herniations heal more reliably than the more mild disc herniation, like regression to the norm. So the worse off you are as a result of the thing that's happened, the closer you're going to end up getting towards, more reliably, you're going to end up regressing back to the norm. But 90% of disc herniations will heal within 16 weeks. Reasonable time frame is 4 months. That's not to say, hey, let's no sweat off your back, you're going to be in pain for months. But most injuries are not these like lifelong debilitating conditions. Really, there's a little bit of guidance that's relevant, could be useful from a rehab practitioner. And then beyond that, it's like the individual just needs to move. There was, I don't know the name of the study, but I think it was posted by Menno Hensel on Instagram. And he shared a study a couple months ago where they looked at outcomes of physio patients. I think it was just specific physio patients who had gone for one treatment session versus a series of twice a week for 12 or 16 weeks.
Yeah.
And the outcomes were the exact same. There's benefit to just having a little bit of guidance and support and being put at ease from any trepidations you have around being exposed to movement or re-aggravating your injury and having some parameters in play. But you generally don't need to be reliant on your practitioner. There, you said they're the guide earlier, or you're the guide as the coach. The way that I try to portray myself to clients is you're driving the car on the enduring road trip. I'm sitting in the passenger seat with a map in my head. So you're going to tell me where you want to go. I don't know the destination. It's your job to tell me the destination. But I'm going to tell you what route I think you should take to get there, but your feet are on the gas and the brake. So you're going to be able to decide, okay, do you want to speed up a little bit? And I'll give you my 2 cents around, is this an appropriate time to be speeding up? Do we have a big curve that's coming up ahead? But ultimately, I'm just there as the guide. You're driving the car.
Dude, you're the analogy king.
I know.
How can people find the right professional for them?
That's a really good question. There are a couple litmus tests that I have. One is your practitioner asks you, do you have any more questions after they've explained something? That's a really good indicator that they actually care about what you have to say.
Yes.
This isn't like a black or white sort of thing. I'm a big fan of people who start their appointments with the question, how can I help you? That's how I start almost every visit I have. Sometimes the individual doesn't know the answer to that and they're almost overwhelmed by what direction they can go to. Another litmus test that I like is after being asked how they can help you, how long does the practitioner wait before they cut you off during your answer? Is it 2 minutes? Is it 10 minutes? If you have 8 minutes worth of information to get off your chest, and they let you speak for 8 minutes. So those are like some things I've just picked up over the years, because I do think that the client is the hero of the story. And it's really important to actually get a sense of where are they coming to me from such that I can help them, not so that I can tell them how I can use my expertise to make them better. That's not really like a coach.
Yeah.
You can get a good sense based off of how passive versus active modality based they are. Are they sending you home with homework? Are they giving you a plan that not only says, hey, you're just going to go do this thing for the week, and it will lead to this, and that will lead to that. And so there's a sense of here's where we're starting, but here's where we want to go. And this is the general
roadmap
there. Are they receptive and responsive to questions? If you email your practitioner, do they reply to your email? Or is it just, hey, book it, we'll answer it then? And some things might warrant a very lengthy discussion, and it is necessary to sit down.
Which will be explained in the email.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't expect my client to, if they send me 20 questions, that's probably going to warrant it. I'm not going to respond to 20 straight questions in email.
Yes.
But I should be generally receptive to somebody asking me a question or two if they need clarification on an exercise. I think that if somebody tells you that their way is the best way, that also is a pretty big red flag, because
that's my red flag.
certain people respond to different methods. There are some people who are like, I swear by acupuncture, it fixed me. Cool. Not my approach, but if it worked for you, amazing. I'm so happy to hear that.
Absolutely.
How well acclimated or how experienced are they with delivering resistance training to the individual, prescribing resistance training? Are they somebody who was afraid to have you deadlift 130 pounds? Or if you're a 600-pound power lifter, do they feel comfortable having you deadlift 600 pounds in the clinic or in the gym?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be a pretty good catch-all list.
That's a good list.
Yeah, if they keep you in TheraBand jail, that would be another one. If they only give you TheraBand exercises, they're underloading you. They're not being considerate of the fitness and force demands that you need to be exposed to in your real life. If all of those pieces are satisfied, like, you've got a pretty good practitioner.
Yeah, I unfortunately, there are some people out there that check all those boxes off. Yeah. So what would you say your vision is for long-term care, long-term patient care, for those who are active and want to get back to training pain-free? What does that look like for you?
For like, how would I work with people to do that? Or like,
how would you like the system itself to shift direction? Is that too big of a question?
That's a 40-minute podcast.
It's a 40-minute podcast.
I would like to see greater bridging of the gap between the rehab and the strength conditioning. And I think what would accomplish that would be having the rehab practitioners get better exposure to strength training and strength and conditioning theory, and just like being in a gym loading individuals while in physio school, and having individuals in strength conditioning, academic based setting, being exposed to injury based stuff. Now, the caveat is when somebody is more acutely injured, like, we don't necessarily want to take somebody who may or may not be like a regulated healthcare professional and throw them into working with somebody day one post-op ACL reconstruction. Yeah. That's where there is a bit of an increased degree of sensitivity for the rehab practitioner. Ironically, I find the best rehab practitioners are the individuals who are strength and conditioning coaches and not physios and chiros and ATs. Yeah. But that's my own personal bias. Yeah. There needs to be more of a consideration of the lane. This is almost in contrast to what I just said, but staying in the lane of where your expertise and wealth of knowledge is. And so specific to that, it's like, sometimes I'll get directions from physicians that just don't make any sense, as they'll tell me to do something with a patient, but what they prescribed has no bearing on the individual's physical function. It's like, they're going to prescribe, generalizing, but they might prescribe, and I've had this happen, ultrasound and shockwaves twice a week for 8 weeks because they have an ankle sprain. No mention of exercise, no mention of loading. It's like, the person needs to get back to moving. The physiotherapist is the movement professional. Yeah. Let the physio do their job. If they have a medical issue, then I would rightfully so defer to the physician. Exactly. Yeah. It's greater collaboration, but also having more exposure from the strength conditioning and the rehab side. It's a bridge that.
Like you mentioned, the limitations, that would be on my litmus test, knowing your own limitation.
Sure.
Like, I've had some people who have come to me and I've said, I will refer you to someone else because I don't have the expertise to manage your case.
Yep.
And that's on my litmus test.
100%.
Like, dude, like, you're trying to take on everyone. That's
a problem. You need to know who you're working with. I'm not trained in acu. I don't do acupuncture. From my fitness coaching background, like, I don't really do a whole lot in the realm of nutrition and dietetics. Like, I focus more on movement. That's more where I'm trained on. And from a physio side of things, I definitely don't prescribe anything nutritionally wise scope. But if somebody has nutritional needs, it's cool. I've got a great network of dietitians and nutritionists who I can connect you to.
And that person will look at you as the professional who will.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, here's another one. Somebody tells you they don't know the answer to something. That's big. If somebody says that they have the answer to everything, or seems to come across as knowing the answer to everything, and they don't say the words, I don't know, or maybe you got lucky and you're only asking them things that they do actually know. But that's a big red flag.
Big flag. Man, I could take this so much longer. Where can people find you?
They could find me on, I think, every social media platform at dan.propelfitness. I write a weekly newsletter called the Propel Fitness Journal. Put out Instagram content, YouTube. I will eventually start a podcast probably by the end of the year.
Oh,
I would love to have you on at some point.
I'd love to.
TikTok, Facebook. That's it. Same handle. Everything at Propel Fitness.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming. You're going to go train soon, right?
I am. Going to go lift the weights.
What's on deck for tonight?
I don't know. I haven't gotten my program yet.
Oh, you don't know yet.
Yeah.
So you're just going to show up. There's going to be like a workout of the day and you're going to bang.
I'm waiting for my coach to send me my program.
You've been the coach as a
Yeah.
coach. Sign of good practitioner.
Yeah. We're biased to our own opinions.
Thank you so much for taking the time to join us, Dan.
Absolutely.
And I look forward to joining your new podcast.
Cool.